People of Reddit, what is the main indication that a therapist is not good at their job? I had one who was writing diligently as I was speaking and asked me a question, which was everything I had just explained. Were you writing your grocery list over there? Dana S. Also, I had one that stopped me mid-sentence and told me she needed to make a personal call. I clammed up for the rest of the session. At the end, she told me to make another 6 appointments with the receptionist. Instead, I told the receptionist to tell the therapist I would not be back, and hopefully she will be able to figure out why. I'll never go back to therapy. I'll die screwed up. Gossip about other patients. Bringing religion to therapy. Judging when someone in your family is gay. After that it was goodbye forever, and whoever asked me about that therapist, I made sure that all the shit is quite known and that they never go to her. Yep. All of this did happen to me personally. I was quite angry at this person and couldn't understand how does she even have a working license. She was supposed to be a psychologist therapist and therefore have a good understanding for various different people with their mental problems. Say that after hearing about my history of horrific child abuse and how that's affecting me in my adulthood, he kept saying you keep behaving like you have no rights and would get frustrated with me. I mean, yes, I want to fix that because clearly I haven't had my boundaries respected, haha. Getting into a romantic relationship was paramount to introduce some form of love into my life, while I was adamant that I wanted to handle my baggage first because it wouldn't be fair to the other person. They insert political opinions into your session that marks them as hostile. I mentioned to a therapist that I was NB and she commented that she didn't really understand all the gender stuff. She also seemed to assume my being polyamorous was a problem that needed to be fixed. Oh, and when I mentioned I feel I may have ADHD, autism, she accused me of just wanting to get drugs. If I just wanted drugs, I've been offered them by friends with ADHD. I mentioned it to her because I wanted to figure out if they were right for me with an expert. I was being attended by a therapist paid by my job. She just would talk and talk non-stop for the entire length of the session. Even when she asked me questions, she would respond herself and continue to talk. How have you felt lately? Because last time you barely articulated your feelings. NK, you may need to refocus your priorities in the frame of avoiding a burnout. That could be very dangerous and affect your self-image and your personal brand at work, which in turn could etc. So on for 90 minutes, once a week for 6 weeks. 8 years ago, I had a therapist disgustingly glare at me like I was an alien from another planet. When I was explaining to her that I struggled with my maternal bonds with my children, I never wanted kids and ended up having to for my ex-husband when we were together. It fucked me up. I tried seeing a therapist and she was appalled when I told her I wish I'd never had my kids. I didn't go to her for very long because all she did was shame me and made me feel like a piece of shit. Mother, I needed serious help and she made me hate myself more. I was explaining to my therapist the actions of a friend co-worker who was simultaneously betraying my trust and also sacrificing his job at the time. She was more focused on the fact that my friend was putting his extremely sought-after job at risk than she was about how it affected myself and my feelings. It felt unprofessional. Almost like the response you would expect from a friend you were venting to, and she seemed to put a lot of focus on that little detail for the rest of the session. I never saw her again after that. When your therapist tells you to drop all your delusions that kept you surviving, without giving you any coping skills and treating you badly because you don't have any, I dropped her as my therapist instantly. She was supposed to be the therapist who was an expert in CPTSD. She marked me as bipolar when more than one of her colleagues stated I was a clear-cut case of CPTSD, and refused to actually give her any useful information. It was no, this is the end game. You need to do this all instantly, without knowledge or help. They didn't even let me talk. They spent all 3 sessions talking about themselves while I just nodded. I was bemused every time I left. Also, their office was just covered with crosses. I remember sitting on the couch, not even paying attention to them, and counting 15 crosses on the walls. They really did seem like a nice person, or at least well-meaning. Thankfully, I wasn't there because I needed help. I just needed some tests done for ADHD medication. But I always left thinking, I'm so glad they are my real therapist. The only time I've seen a therapist was when I was about 13 years. This was about 93. It was an old guy that would literally fall asleep mid-appointment. He was into chess, taught me how to play, and I quickly started beating him. Seems his ego couldn't take that too well. Mind the sleeping all that much, I didn't want or need to talk to anyone anyways. But when he started acting more and more butthurt after I beat him, I told my mum enough was enough to stop seeing him. Anyways, I'd say falling asleep on the job. They keep bringing up topics that you've already said you're fine and secure with, and are not issues. Example, I mentioned I was atheist to a therapist BC. I saw he had a religious leaning on his website, to be sure he'd be comfortable with me. He said yes, and then he kept asking about my atheism when that was not what I was there about. Or denying your experiences and the understandings. Example, was told I couldn't be bi because I hadn't missed a person of that gender at that time. I dumped both quickly, arguing with me about what I'm feeling, or correcting me, questioning the reality of my work conditions, and why I don't just leave. It's in the job description. Leaving won't fix it. If I say something made me feel despondent, asking if I meant to say angry and guessing at my feelings, it's just insulting. If I was angry, I would have said angry. This was in the first few getting to know you sessions, so there was nowhere near enough rapport for them to already be questioning my basis for being there. They have the same client for 6 years and have not figured out their client's version of events is not accurate. I have a family member who is very self-absorbed and refuses accountability. She has been seeing the same therapist for 6 years and has not improved. She just goes for validation, not to apply anything to her actual real life. This therapist has been convinced that her family is mean, and that her client has never been rude to anyone she is. That's why people keep her at arm's length. After about the 4th visit, I realized that all she was really doing with me was having a chat. We didn't talk much about my issues, causes, destructive behaviors or tools to correct them, ways to learn healthier modes of thinking, behaving, coping, all things I went to the therapist for. She just felt like a semi-invested acquaintance who didn't remember details about me or familiarize herself with her notes on me before each session, and liked to talk about herself quite a lot. Never had a therapist, but those shitty school therapists are so undereducated. What makes them shitty coming from someone who never went to therapy is their lack of help when faced with a current school problem. Tea over the phone, death threats, screenshotting, digital footprint. I know these topics are fairly new in the past 10-20 years they've existed, but they are very important to be aware of. Nonetheless, although I understand you are hurt by this experience, men are different than women, and it's understandable that he was interested in a woman who was younger than him due to his biological needs. I was diagnosed at 12 as having antisocial personality disorder. The therapist was Christian-based, and I still held a grudge from being exorcised. Of course, I wasn't talking to his sick fuck self, so Christian-based therapy for those not religious, having anxiety and suicidal ideations. My real problem was I was an alcoholic when I only drank with friends on holidays. Ever drink 1 glass of alcohol? Well, you are an alcohol that hasn't relapsed. Because I'm seeing the same mistakes over and over in this thread, I'd like to share 2 pieces of advice. Point 1 is hard to find a good therapist. Keep trying even if you've gone through a few already. 2 therapists have specializations. If the issue you're trying to address isn't one of their specializations, they aren't going to be properly equipped to help you. Always look for therapists specializing in your specific problem or type of problem. I had a counseling student once who wrote in her notes, or I was relaying my childhood as she, trying to get me to feel sorry for her. I can read upside down. I called the therapist that was mentoring her and told them I was not coming back and why. The lack of compassion was staggering. For the record, I was raped, beaten and mentally abused by my mother 4 years and was suffering from PTSD. I hope that woman rethought her career choice. I was sexually abused by another kid, and therapist told me kids don't assault, and that's what kids do. Since the child was a girl. Asked me if I was gay. Then at 18, went to a psych ward and told nurse, and they told me ask me same thing. 20 years later, It still hurts telling an adult your pain and then downsizing it. I would never do this to a child. I'm finally getting EDMR treatment for it. One of my most traumatic childhood experiences. Last week I had to fire my therapist. I had been doing an online teletherapy service and had seen her for about 3 months. I was about to start family therapy, and I was crying to my therapist saying that I'm anxious that doing family therapy will change my family dynamic. She didn't respond for 20 seconds and looked like she was typing on her computer. Then she finally said, "How is dating going?" After that I was like, no. When they aren't familiar with the methodology you came to them to use, and that they posted on their profile skill set, and when they take it personally, when you calmly ask if there can be concrete goals and progress markers, when they simply say it takes time, so you go through the trauma of telling them your life story for 10 weeks, then ask again if we can use some methodology and set goals, and they have no real answer. The conversation feels natural and warm, yet at the same time they are always very professional. They don't blurt out random comments because the thought popped into their head. C.F. Me her weight loss journey and struggles with quitting smoking I did not ask, and saying stuff like, "Wow, you're on that med. The side effects are terrible when you quit. Wow. Thanks for the info."